Heading via Zoom to Sydney to catch up with our resident expert on all things small business. Her name is Angela Vithoulkas. Welcome back. I missed you last week. We need to talk about
It's nice.
Go on.
It's nice to be back. Thank you.
Look, these are incredibly complex times. It seems to me that everybody seems to be making decisions for everyone else, except the people who need to make the decisions. What do you make of what we're going on with? Because I noticed that the unions and of course COSBOA, which is another organisation which does tremendous work to support small business, are suddenly doing this teaming up thing and leaving all those small businesses on the outside. Have I read it the wrong way? Or am I not reading the tea leaves correctly?
No, you're reading the tea leaves correctly. What's going on is that there's a lot of horse trading happening on the subject of casual employment and part-time employment and what that means to everybody. And strangely enough, there's a new marriage of convenience between the unions and COSBOA. They've come to an arrangement and an agreement to put forward policy on what part-time penalty rates look like if they work extra. And the other big employer groups are all doing their little tanty dance. That's what I'm calling it, a tanty dance. So they've collectively spat the dummy, the big employer groups, and said, how can you go off and play on your own and not play with us in our playground? And the only loser out of all of this, of course, is the regular, everyday small business owner who isn't a member of the big employer groups because we don't want to pay $20,000 a year membership, who's not a member of COSBOA because they represent industry associations and not individuals. And last time I looked, I wasn't a member of any union, but I'm thinking about making my own.
Look, you can see now where this is going to fall. There are going to be so many areas and so many people on the outside looking in that shouldn't be the case. Can you see a resolution?
Honestly, George, I don't think there is any outcome that's actually going to work for small business owners because everybody is hung up on the word casual and what supposedly business owners do to these people who are casually employed. Now, I want to say that all of these big cases of wage theft and how everybody's role is defined via a wage award is happening from big employers, not regular small business owners. And we need to have the flexibility of casual employment for lots of different reasons. But we pay for that, George. We pay a higher hourly rate, sometimes up to $8 or $10 an hour more for that employee, so that we have peace of mind and flexibility. And those are exactly the things that they are trying to take away from us because supposedly the union is worried about the casual workforce and how it's not giving the employees any security and certainty. Have they asked those employees that work in small businesses what kind of security and certainty they need? Because they're certainly not asking the small business owner.
Wow. There was another thing that came out last week and I wanted to talk to you about it, and that was the findings of the Royal Commission into aged care. Two different commissioners who had been appointed in different circumstances because we know that two commissioners who had been appointed, one had to step down, another got sick. So it's been a really convoluted story all round. A bunch of findings, two different positions. What are we to make of that? And especially in small business.
It's quite startling because the Aged Care Royal Commission has been going on for some time. They've taken evidence from thousands and thousands of people. The government has been named and shamed and stumped up billions more dollars to go into the system. And yet a solution that is unified still hasn't been presented. But the real curious thing here is, and I will keep saying this, George, for a very long time, put a small business owner in charge of a hard problem that government and big business can't seem to resolve, and you will actually find the cheapest and fastest way out. We know how to join the dots from A to B. We don't go on a tour, on a scenic tour between A and B and include the other 20 odd letters of the alphabet in between. So the big difference here is that there were 4 key findings that seem to amaze everyone, but not the small business community. And number one is that under a new program, older Australians will actually have a choice. They'll be able to independently assess how their aged care is allocated. Oh, I don't know. Small business has known that about customers for decades, hundreds, if not thousands of years. Give the customer what they want, give them an experience, a bespoke experience, and they will be very happy. How come suddenly government and the big business within aged care, because there's big dollars in aged care, George, big dollars, how come suddenly they care about people having a choice? So that what they haven't recognised and what small business is all fired up about is they're not actually coming out and saying, you've never had a choice and shame on you. They're just saying, oh, we've made a big discovery. Let's give you a choice.
There's something else that struck me was the two commissioners in this instance handed down slightly different treatments on how to get the answers we need. Is it possible that we're also seeing how two very differently experienced professionals have come to this major challenge and have given us two different perspectives? I understand that they've found similar outcomes, but they've also come at it from different perspectives. Could it well be that one is the seasoned old commissioner, federal court judge and so on, who has been there for an eternity, 20, 30 years, whereas the other member who was keen on the findings came from a completely different background. And as a result, we have two different ways at getting the final thing sorted. It seems to me you can't expect them to find the same outcome. It's almost impossible.
So the biggest difference, of course, is the funding model
yes.
on moving forward
yes.
for aged care.
Yep.
And that's where the discrepancy lies. Now, the interesting perspective here is that neither one of them perhaps have the experience of the reality of funding within government, you know, what happens behind closed doors and how budgets actually get drawn up. And then the other side of that, of course, is how the general public is going to perceive any funding model. Is it going to, are we all going to kind of stand back and go, well, I'm not going to pay an additional 1% levy for an aged care system that I may or may not be part of, and that you clearly have no idea how to handle and manage my money. Now, the interesting there is, George, is that no one has pointed out, in my opinion, that whichever funding model they undertake, it should be quarantined for that. The scary part is that, as us small business owners have pointed out, is that the government wants to take our money and probably put it into general contingency funds and use it wherever they see fit, instead of saying, this particular levy is only for aged care, will never be used for anything other than aged care. And frankly, we don't care which model you use, as long as you promise us that that money will stay in the system continuously. Because that's been the big problem, right? They haven't funded the model. They've shortchanged it, and then surprise, surprise, it's broken and it doesn't work. But still, the big end of town is making money. How does that work?
Angela, you've promised me each and every week we'll always end with something that's a little upbeat, a little softer, a little funnier perhaps. What have you got for me?
Well, I did miss out last week, and I was going to bring you the Wiggles and what they're currently doing with their music tour.
Right.
But surprisingly enough, this is kind of like a twist on the Wiggles, because it just goes to show you, Mr. Denikian, that all families are actually the same. So today, we know that in the last 72 hours, the proverbial has hit the fan, because the royal family is shock horror having issues over Harry and Meghan and Megxit and whatever that entails. Now, I'm not going to get into the finer points, because I've already relished it myself the last 72 hours, because I can't get enough of it, because I love to see other people in twisted pain. However, the funny thing here is that the bombshell that Meghan dropped about the racism card that she played, no matter where you sit on that issue, the interesting thing is what the bookies are doing about that issue. So there's a book happening. People are taking bets. Who done it? Or who said it? Or who stuffed it all up for the Queen? So someone in the royal family may or may not have had this conversation with Meghan or Harry, and it may or may not have been at the recollected times that they both say. So there's some ambiguity there, but someone did say it, and they won't say who. So there's a book happening with